video, I'm going to explain various verb forms in English, specifically in relation to the past simple tense, as this is one of the most commonly used tenses in academic English. In a previous video, I described academic examples of the three most commonly used verb tenses in academic English: the present simple tense, the past simple tense, and the present perfect tense. While the verb forms used in the present tense is often easy to remember, it is usually more difficult to understand the past tense versions of these verbs. This video will explain some basic principles for you to remember how to change your verbs to convey past tense. There are two types of verbs: regular verbs and irregular verbs. Most English verbs are regular verbs. This means we can usually just add the letters ed to the end of the verb to indicate past tense. Some examples of this include explain that becomes explained, discuss that becomes discussed, and analyze that becomes analyzed. If a regular verb ends in the letter E, you only need to add the letter D to indicate past tense. Some examples of this are agree that becomes agreed, and compare that becomes compared. Some regular verbs have a consonant-vowel-consonant structure at the end. An example of such a verb is plan. To change these types of verbs into past tense, we need to double the last consonant before adding the letter ed. So plan becomes planned by doubling the last consonant n and then adding ed. Finally, some regular verbs end in the letter y. In order to change these verbs into past tense, we need to remove the letter y and replace it with the letters I, E, D. For example, the word try becomes tried and falsify becomes falsified. There are, however, some irregular verbs in English. These verbs do not follow these normal rules when you want to change them into past tense. In this video, I will describe a few basic guidelines for using irregular verbs in the past tense. For further study, there are many examples available on the internet that provide you with extensive lists of irregular verbs to learn. Certain irregular verbs do not change form regardless of whether they are in present or past tense. Some examples of these verbs include put, cut, set, and let. Other irregular verbs that end with the letter D require you to change the D to the letter T to indicate past tense. Some examples of these verbs include send that becomes sent and lend that becomes lent. It is important to note that this only happens for irregular verbs. There are many regular verbs that end in the letter D that follow the normal rules described earlier. For example, the word tend becomes tended in past tense, not tent. In academic English, you will often use irregular verbs that change to include OUGHT at the end in past tense. Some examples of this include seek that becomes sought, think that becomes thought, and bring that becomes brought. Finally, in academic English, you will also sometimes use irregular verbs that end with the letters OW. For example, know and grow. To change these verbs into past tense, you need to change the letter O to an E. So know becomes knew and grow becomes grew. Once again, it is important to remember that this is only true for the irregular verbs in English. There are many regular verbs that end in OW that follow the normal rules described at the start of this video. For example, the word show becomes showed in past tense, not shoe.